Before departing on a 4-leg trip around the Democratic Republic of the Congo, passengers boarded this LET L410. Little did the passengers or crew know that deadly cargo had been brought into the cabin. This would be unknown to mostly everyone on board until the approach into their penultimate airport, when this cargo would cause mass hysteria in the cabin, leading the normal approach to turn into an impossible fight for survival. To see what happened and what happens next, stay tuned. Just before we continue, I want to thank Gloria, aka Dovetail, and Palindrome1959 for bringing this incident to my attention in the comments. I couldn't believe what I was reading when I first saw this incident, and I hope you feel the same way. On the 25th of August 2010, this Philair LET L410 was preparing for a round-robin cross-country domestic passenger flight in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They would be flying to 4 destinations within the country before returning to Ndolo Airport in Kinshasa, the capital of the country. There were 18 passengers due to board the aircraft with 3 crew. There wasn't too much information about the pilots, but from what is known, the captain was a Belgian national who was also the owner of the airline, and the first officer was a British national who was previously a cabin crew member on a British airline and had moved to the Democratic Republic of the Congo to follow his dreams of becoming a commercial pilot. About the aircraft itself, this LET L410 Turbolet is a twin-engine short-range transport aircraft, manufactured by the Czech aircraft manufacturer Let Kunovice. Its first flight was in 1991, with it previously being operated by Air Est, an Estonian airline, until 2007, when it was put into storage and then bought by Philair in 2009. On today's flight, it was almost full with 18 passengers entering the aircraft. Unbeknownst to the crew or the other passengers, one of the passengers was bringing a bag that would lead to an outbreak of absolute pandemonium in the cabin. The passengers boarded the aircraft and the pilot started the engines and began to set up for their trip. The weather was looking good for the flight, with a dry day forecast. The wind was currently blowing at 5 knots, the temperature was 29 degrees Celsius, with a pressure setting of 1007 hectopascals. The cabin crew informed the flight crew that the cabin was secure and the flight crew were happy to proceed with the flight. The flight crew taxied the aircraft to the runway before being cleared for takeoff. With everything seemingly normal, the pilots pushed the power levers forward and the aircraft began to roll down the runway. At rotation speed, the aircraft lifted off from the runway and began to climb away from the ground. The initial climb and cruise were completed without any issues, and very soon the crew were ready to complete their first leg. In fact, the next 3 legs were completed without any issue. By the time the crew were on their way to their 4th stopover, the time was around 11:30 UTC. With the aircraft not capable of pressurizing the cabin, the aircraft remained fairly low during the cruise. The passengers and crew were nearing their 4th destination, with the cabin crew preparing the cabin for the approach and subsequent landing. Everyone was informed to fasten their seatbelts and secure all loose cabin bags, including the suspicious bag towards the rear of the aircraft. So at this point, the crew were looking to descend into their final stopover before returning to Ndolo Airport. The flight crew discussed their approach, and with the weather fit to continue, they carried on with a visual approach. The flight crew informed the cabin crew that they were nearing their destination, and then they started to configure the aircraft, taking flap and then extending the landing gear. With the aircraft roughly 5 miles away from the runway threshold, the pilots started to hear a lot of noise and commotion coming from the cabin, with the aircraft starting to move with the nose dropping slightly towards the ground. The pilots were trying to control the aircraft before the cabin crew and passengers then rushed towards the front of the plane. This caused a massive weight imbalance and caused the aircraft to pitch down even further. The pilots were fighting for control and had no choice but to initiate a go-around. They pushed the power levers forward and attempted to pitch the aircraft up. At this point, the aircraft was too close to the ground to recover, with the crew extending the flight to within 1 kilometer of the runway. The aircraft weight was too displaced to regain enough lift, and at 1200 UTC, the plane crashed into a house 1 kilometer short of the runway. Due to the crash, 19 of the 21 occupants were killed, with 2 of the passengers initially surviving. Out of the 2 survivors, they were both taken to hospital, with one of them succumbing to their injuries, leaving only 1 survivor to this crash. The incident takes an extraordinary turn when further details are discovered about the origins of the crash. Initially, it is believed that the crash was caused by the aircraft running out of fuel. There were rumours that one of the engines appeared to be shut down on the approach, which could have been an indicator of fuel starvation, but this could not be confirmed. There also wasn't a post-fire crash, which would have pointed at a lack of fuel. It was later reported by a Filair spokesman that there were 150 litres of fuel remaining in the tanks at the point of the crash. The Congolese Ministry of Transport opened an investigation into the accident. Soon after, they were able to interview the survivor of the crash and get an eyewitness account of what happened. She eventually stated that during the approach into the airport, the flight attendant had moved to the rear of the aircraft to deal with an issue around a bag. Shortly after, the flight attendant was very panicked and ran forwards towards the cockpit. When the rest of the passengers looked to see what the problem was, they noticed a crocodile loose on the plane that had escaped out of the passenger's bag. This panic built throughout the cabin and caused many of the passengers to move forward away from the creature. It was this issue that caused the passengers to push forward, completely displacing the balance of the aircraft and causing it to lose control and stall. Skepticism around this story was only increased due to the initial story coming from the survivor, who stated that the passengers were originally running forward because it looks like the aircraft was not lined up with the main runway, which caused the panic. They then later changed the story to the crocodile causing the panic. More information on this incident and investigation were released in 2014 during the inquiry into the death of the British pilot. The father of the pilot had contacted the original investigator of the incident and exchanged emails. During this exchange, he was told that there was a gentleman who came up with a story about a crocodile. There is apparently a video of the crocodile being taken out of the plane, and because of the release of the crocodile, they think that it may have frightened the cabin crew member and she ran forward with the other passengers following. They believe the weight shift caused by the panic may have affected the plane, causing it to nosedive or stall. He later added that the crocodile would have been a maximum of 2 or 3 feet in length, but also clarified that we do not know if one was being carried for certain, although it was apparently quite normal for animals and chickens to be carried on the plane, as it was used as a taxi in this regard. With this information from the investigator, it would appear that the story becomes more plausible, albeit still up for debate. During the inquest, an air accident investigator said he had reviewed the evidence given to him by the Congolese authorities, but was unable to draw any definitive conclusions because they were not handed over the black box, further stating that the most likely explanation I can find is that the aircraft stalled and/or was in a spin prior to impact. There is no evidence suggesting an engine failure or nosedive, although I cannot be sure without looking at the plane. He went on to say that it would reinforce the idea that the accident appears to have the hallmarks of a stall and spin, which may have been from a variety of causes. Essentially, it fell out of the sky. The court heard sabotage of the plane may also have been a possibility, as rival companies fiercely competed for business. Towards the end of the inquest, it was said that there was not enough evidence to conclude any one of the factors had caused the crash, and said contradicting evidence had been presented for all. Finally concluding with the following: problems with direct witnesses and problems with the black box have only resulted in vague guesses as to what happened with this crash. All we have are possibilities rather than probabilities. This incident must be one of the most interesting yet extraordinary incidents I have seen. Very rarely, if ever, will you hear of an incident that has been caused directly by the passengers, not including hijacking. But what do you think? Was the panic caused by the release of a crocodile or something else? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below. As you know, I am always trying to bring you new and interesting incidents. As you saw with this one, I only found it because of your comments. If you have an incident in mind that you would like to see featured on this channel, let me know and I'll take a look. I hope you found this video interesting, and as always, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.